All right, it's a Friday morning, and of course, we've got all kinds of things happening in the world and in the news. Actually, it seems like there is a job surge, so we'll see how that plays in the whole race for the president and all along those lines. But apparently, there is a U.S. job growth which surged past expectations with 336,000 new posts. So it looks like there are 336,000 new jobs as of September, and they are saying that that could stoke the Treasury yield surge, or it could actually stop it in its tracks. So definitely there is a sign of a labor market cool down in focus, but definitely any times that there are jobs added, that is probably a good thing and all along those lines. But definitely it'll be interesting to see what goes on. And as I was just talking to Nick, it does look like Trump has endorsed Jim Jordan as the House Speaker. So I guess he doesn't want the job, but he wants Jim Jordan to have the job and all along those lines. And Kevin McCarthy's endorsements in the GOP House primaries are being used against candidates. So definitely that is going on in the political landscape as well. So there's definitely all kinds of things that are taking place and all along those lines. So it'd be interesting to see what goes on and how things continue or don't continue in that regards. If you wondered about things going on in the world, Iran's jailed rights advocate Narges Mohammadi won the 2023 Nobel Peace Prize. So that is something that is going on, and a lot of folks are probably paying attention to that human rights conversation. And India flash floods have left more than 100 people missing, and that is going on as well. A glacial lake that sent deadly waters was identified as dangerous way back in 2019. And at least 48 people were killed in a Russian missile strike on a Ukrainian grocery store, according to Zelensky. So, definitely, we're seeing these strikes on both sides that are taking place in that global situation and all along those lines. As a matter of fact, Putin is challenging the West, saying, "What right do you have to warn anyone?" So, definitely, that is something that is going on, and he is suggesting adding India and other countries to the UN Security Council. So that is something that is also taking place as well, and I'm sure that Sasha Starr might have some thoughts about that, as well as the attack and a number of other things that are taking place in the world. So we're gonna see who pops in other than me and Nick. And Tropical Storm Felipe is strengthening, so that is something that is going on. It is on track to drench parts of New England and Canada, so it might be impacting Sasha up there as well. We'll see if it heads into his general direction or not. And Britain's Labour Party is claiming a seismic win in the Scottish vote. So definitely that is something that is going on. And definitely that is something that is always in the news, the things that are taking place in England and in Europe in general. So that is something else that we are seeing. And you got to love these drone attacks. They're happening in all kinds of military conflicts, because apparently there was a drone attack on the Syria military college that killed at least 89 and wounded 100 more. So that was taking place in the Middle East. And coming back to Putin, Putin is suggesting that the Wagner boss Prigozhin's plane was brought down by a grenade blast. So he is claiming that that is how that plane came down, and all in that way. And Canada is moving several diplomats from India to Singapore, Malaysia. So India roars at Trudeau and refuses to go soft on the Canadian embassy staff cut. So that is something that is taking place because of that whole conflict between Canada and India over the assassination of the Sikh leader there in Canada. So definitely that is something that is going on. One of the things I was going to get to yesterday that I didn't get to is this notion of refugees, and I think it's millions of them that are in uh, Pakistan and all along those lines. And now they have been expelled because the Pakistani minister defended his decision to expel the Afghans and all along those lines. So Amnesty International has asked Pakistan to keep hosting Afghans, as their expulsion may put them at risk. So that is something else that is going on the global community and all in that way. Philippines are furious after the Chinese Coast Guard ship comes within 3 feet of colliding with a Philippine vessel. So that is a very close call. There is no doubt about that, and all along those lines. And EU leaders are primed for a clash on migration at the Spanish summit. So you thought this migration issue is just a United States issue? Apparently not, because Hungary and Poland are railing at EU migration policies as the bloc leaders are meeting, and the United Kingdom Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni are calling for tougher EU actions on migration. So, like I said, migration is not just an issue here in the United States, it is an issue around the world and all along those lines. Let me get to a couple of other things on the U.S. because definitely Matt Gaetz is definitely in the news as well. And Lauren Boebert said it would be childish and vengeful for Republicans to remove Matt Gaetz after he led the McCarthy ousting. So that is something that is going on. And now we're going to find out who the new speaker will be and all along those lines. And as winter looms, Venezuelan migrants are surge overwhelms Chicago. So apparently there's a lot of Venezuelans heading to Chicago, and Chicago is bracing for buses carrying up to 1,250 migrants daily. And they're saying that that is an untenable situation. So definitely that is going on. And of course, there is a path cleared for the Texas border wall expansion, and Biden administration clears the way for construction of 20 miles of border wall in Texas. And get to a couple of last minute stories, and then we'll get to Nick and myself and see if anybody else joins in. But former Manhattan assistant DA says Letitia James made a tactical error in blasting Trump over the trial. So, but Attorney General Letitia James says she will not back down from the Trump fraud trial in Chicago. So that is something that is going on. And Trump's corporate controller tells court they boosted the value of his Trump Tower penthouse. So definitely we're seeing a lot of stuff going on in that way. And over in Brooklyn, a Brooklyn bus stabbing, a 48-year-old suspect was arrested and charged with murder. And that was in a case where a Massachusetts native and activist was killed in an unprovoked New York City stabbing, according to police, and all along those lines. So, and coming back to Trump is planning to seek to dismiss election interference charges, saying that he had presidential immunity and Senate acquittal. So that is something that is going on as well. And as Nick mentioned, there is that strike that is taking place, and that is still ongoing. And we'll see whether there are any sort of appeals or negotiations that go on in that space and all along those lines. And last but not least, the Dianne Feinstein, the longtime California senator, was remembered at her funeral service. And definitely a lot of people were saying that her empathy made her more than a politician, and that she will definitely be remembered in a lot of ways over these next years and all along those lines. So I'm going to bring in Nick, see what he's got to say. I guess the first thing is that there's apparently good news. Apparently we're getting jobs in the United States and all along those lines. But you follow that more than I do, and you're definitely involved in things on the legal side. So what is your thoughts? Is it good news that we've got jobs and that the jobs market apparently is improving? So that is what they are saying. But, you know, that thing is a ebb and flow. So we'll see if it actually continues to ebb or if it flows in the wrong direction. But, you know, the Kaiser Permanente strike probably isn't helping any. But what is your thoughts about this whole notion of a better job market?
Well, the thing is, we anticipated a pretty good job market, and the job market has been pretty strong, Mark, for the last many, many years. It's good to be out there, but it's starting to soften. But what it hasn't done is it did in the past, is where all of a sudden we start losing jobs. So we haven't really seen a recession. However, a lot of the commentators out there are looking for another recession, realizing that this generation has never gone through a 2008 hit. The stock market basically gave away all their gains this year in the last month. So anybody who has money in the market made nothing. When I did a study for our retirement plans, which is quite interesting, from the year 2000 to 2009, if you invested everything in the S&P 500, everything, you would have lost 25% of your money. Okay, and that's over a 10-year period. If you put it in a fixed annuity, which is what we put in pensions, you would have been up about 40%. The spread was absolutely huge. In other words, the difference between what a fixed instrument would pay, a 4% gain, for example, over 10 years as opposed to the market. The myth out there is the market always does well over a long period of time. The reality, and I encourage, you don't have to look at my study, the numbers are out there. You just go look at the numbers on the S&P 500 from the year 2000 to 2009, and you say, well, I'm going to put it on the S&P 500 and retire 10 years. You can find your spread to be pretty bad, literally. Now, here's the good news. If you went from 2010 to 2020, you're much further ahead in the S&P 500. So that decade was definitely the decade of the S&P 500. Now we're looking at year 2020 till, let's say, 2030. The problem is we don't know what's going to be a better return, the S&P 500 or a fixed instrument. And but with the myth out there, which exists, is the S&P 500 always does better, and I encourage people to do their own research. Frankly, it does not, even over a long period of time for 10 years. Now, good news in our retirement plans, they force us to be in fixed instruments. So we have to give these guaranteed returns. So the pensions are always pretty well funded. But the stock market isn't clear. Now, what we're looking at right now with a high interest rate environment is the market cooling off. Real estate's cooling off. The stocks are cooling off. And the economy, in essence, may go into a block freeze. At least that's what I've seen in the real estate market.
That's interesting and everything. One of the other things that I'm seeing, and actually Lee Newton Rhodes, who is in listening mode today and everything, was asking a good question, and I don't have the answer because I did mention those jobs, and he was wondering if those were good quality jobs and if they were full-time jobs, because I do know that sometimes
most of them are
part of the conversation as well.
Most of them are good quality jobs, Mark, but they're such pigeonholed that most people don't qualify for them. For example, they want an IT specialist who it has 10 years experience in artificial intelligence. I mean, they ask for things that most people don't have because a lot of it does not exist. So a lot of the jobs out there are these, what I call these really niche pigeonhole jobs. Mm-hmm. And so not everybody can apply and get them. It's not like you can walk into them because they're really niche specialty jobs, but they do pay well. But you have to be basically in the industry to do it. But the overall market, in terms of job market, looks pretty sound right now. The Federal Reserve, as much as they criticize it, and we had a meeting with them several years back in Chicago, we filmed with the Federal Reserve. They're actually very thoughtful people. They actually do try to do their job, whether the popular press hammers them a lot. And their job is to, maintain a good, working and healthy economy. With that in mind, we have some underpinnings that I don't see how you're going to, on a long-term basis, be able to sustain that, mainly with the federal debt at 33 trillion now. Last time we talked, it was 31 trillion. We're looking at a deficit, the Biden deficit, 1.5 trillion. That just adds more to the national debt. And we're going to be going over that on Economics Monday, this Monday, with the Honorable David M. Walker, former Comptroller General of the United States. But that isn't the bad part. You can imagine that's bad, but that's not the bad part. Social Security is going broke next decade, and Medicare goes broke this decade, and we know what's going to happen. They're going to run to Congress and say, please fund us, and Congress is going to say, we can't, we're broke. And this is what we're seeing all over the place. So what really needs to be done, the Republicans are horrible getting their message out, and we're horrible in the education, is to actually go through the budget and start being sensible with all the money that we're spending. Right now, it's 25% of our GDP. We're going to be going over that at David Walker's show, because after me going through all this education, and you did too, Mark, we never took a class in the federal.
Never took a class in financial literacy or anything along those lines. But along those lines, and with that thought in mind, I was just wondering, because this also came up in the news. There's actually something I was reading, I think an article on The Hill, and they brought up an interesting idea on our national political front. And I'd love to hear your thoughts around this. But it is possible that we could have the second, not the first, but the second. And I know a lot of people will think that I'm talking about Kamala when I mention this, but I'm not talking about Kamala, but the second African-American president, because the article that I read was talking about all these legal troubles that Trump is in and how this could actually create a situation, and then apparently he's added to his trumps. And I've got to find out if Shaquille knows one of these people that I'm going to mention, but I'll mention them later and everything. But with all the legal troubles that he is going through, that at some point he may, and some people say that this is outside of his ego, but that he may step down, and because of his battle with DeSantis and other front runners, he may go down to the third or fourth in line and basically kind of coronate them as the person that he would like to be in the race if he cannot be in the race, and that would be Tim Scott. So Tim Scott could be the leading Republican candidate, which would then send Biden and the Democrats even more scrambling and all along those lines, which could lead to a Tim Scott presidency and everything. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but it is a notion that is out there and everything. So what are your thoughts about this possibility of a Tim Scott presidency?
It's a possibility. We really don't know who the Republican nominee is going to be. But right now, the odds-on favorite is the Donald Trump. The odds-on favorite is Donald Trump wins the election again. And the odds-on favorite is he becomes president of the United States in spite of the baggage that he collects.
Speaking of baggage, I got to add some new baggage. That's why I was, like I said, would be here and everything. But apparently, he's gotten himself in an even deeper trouble, because one of the things that I saw is that recently there is a report out there on some of our media friends that apparently he discussed sensitive nuclear submarine information with a foreign national, that foreign national being from Australia. That's why I was curious, and maybe we'll get Shaquille when he comes in. But apparently there's a gentleman named Anthony Pratt, and Anthony Pratt is apparently an Australian billionaire, and apparently Trump was over there talking to him and told him U.S. nuclear secrets. So definitely that could be something that we had not heard about. So this is a new charge that is out there that just came out and everything. So could that be problematic, since that is definitely something that presidents are not supposed to do, is go over there, whether they're our ally, part of the Five Eyes nations, as definitely Shaquille talks about quite often, and all in that kind of space and everything. But is that going to be problematic? Because I mean, they're an ally, but I don't know if you're supposed to be over there whispering nuclear secrets.
Probably not. See, first of all, the thing is you have to define nuclear secrets, which is not that clear cut. Then you have to define that he doesn't have the ability to discuss it while he was the commander in chief. So I think what happens is that the Democrats, and they're hurting themselves by doing it, they're taking long shots down the field with a quarterback who can't really throw that far, and they're missing. And then they're trying to beat their chest, oh, look how good we are because we can throw the ball down the field, but no one can catch it. And that's what they're doing with Trump, which right now will position Trump to be the next president of the United States, because Trump is turning it around on him and using it, playing the media up, playing his base up, getting attention like there's no tomorrow. Do you ever hear about Nikki Haley? Nope. What about Doug Burnham, who's actually a pretty good candidate? Nope, he gets no press at all. What about Chris Christie? Well, nope. Okay, so as you go through the Republican field, they're all being overshadowed by Donald Trump. So Donald Trump's name recognition keeps flashing out there. And with that, he's turning around and using it to his advantage. And if this continues, he'll be the president of the United States.
Well, like I said, I'm not ready to declare him president yet and everything, because definitely, just to folks that are wondering, apparently this Mr. Pratt is a member of his Mar-a-Lago club, and apparently he went and shared information with him. Then he went around in turn and shared it with 45 others. But apparently he is the Australian cardboard king. And all in that place. He's the Australian cardboard box kingpin, and he has a he's a fixture on the Forbes ranking of the world's billionaires for the past decades, and definitely he had done a number of things.
Another way. Let's discuss more about Trump so that his name is in front of everybody, so he gets one.
Yeah, like I said, it could be problematic, but
that's been the roadmap of the Democratic Party for the last year. Let's figure out how to get Donald Trump elected. And the Democratic Party is doing a great job. I don't know if they can do a better job than this, just to keep his name in front of everybody. If they'd let this...
Apparently, I have to teach you about this. Apparently, they have something in common, him and Trump. And maybe that's why he was talking secrets to him, because apparently Anthony Pratt is very likable. They call him affable and everything. But you're going to love this one. And I know we're the news show, and I know we usually get very serious and everything. But guess what? Color this Australian billionaire hair is?
I have no clue.
He's orange haired. So maybe that's what their
Oh, maybe
similarity is. And maybe that's why
maybe
they were
that's
over there discussing
well,
all of these secrets together.
well,
Because
also interesting on the news was Biden decided to build the wall. Now,
yes, I did see that.
remember, he made a promise, I'm never going to build a wall, and but of course things have changed with 400,000, 2 million people coming across the border. It's almost like his hand is forced to build the wall. So he's starting to build the bloody wall between here and Mexico because they just cannot stop the porous borders of illegal immigrants just flooding across the border this way and guns going back the other way. So you actually have a very interesting trading route on the southern border. The U.S. is sending guns to Mexico and to all the people in Latin America because there's a big demand for it. And the migrants are coming up this way because they want to get out of the gun crime. So what they're going to do is put a border. So I think they're actually going to, well, I mean, Biden says he's going to start building the wall again. So we may actually
start building the wall. Speaking of building walls and everything along those lines, I also saw in the news, and I had not got to that because he's had a interesting stance on the Ukraine and everything. But apparently, as they are campaigning in Iowa, and there's some dispute as to what happened, but apparently Vivek Ramaswamy's car was attacked by a pro-Ukrainian American, and he said that his focus is U.S., not the Kiev, but apparently the protester hit his campaign vehicle outside of a Iowa event. So maybe that was
a couple things should happen. Biden should say, "You're right, Don. We need the wall," but he'll never do that. And Vivek Ramaswamy has no clue what he's doing. And the fact that he gets a lot of attention in the press is the fault of Fox Media. They allowed this guy to interrupt all the time. Part of the reason I didn't watch the debate. And he comes from a culture that's what they do. Remember, there's 1.6 billion Indians. So if you want to get your name out there, you got to push everybody aside and, "Hi, I'm Vivek Ramaswamy." And he did that. And the moderators allowed him to do it, which was really poor on the first debate. And then he rapped, "Oh, no, we're not going to send any money to Ukraine. We're just going to let Russia take over the Ukraine. We don't really care because we're the United States of America." Forget it, Mr. Indian man. Okay. Now, remember, Modi is sort of an ally of Russia. And I know Steve isn't on here, but Steve is a pretty cool guy. He does understand that Russia-India alliance, Russia-China alliance, the BRICS alliance, is not, you don't see the United States of America as part of it. Remember, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So are those guys our friends? Is South Africa our friends, Mark?
There will be 6 new members, including Indonesia, Argentina. 6 more members are coming in.
6 more members. Okay. Now, all those people that are joining the BRICS alliance are basically joining an anti-United States alliance. Okay. And the American public is totally asleep at the wheel. And Vivek Ramaswamy, I don't think he ever woke up. Good news, he won't get the nomination. So we don't have to even worry about it because Trump's going to get the nomination. Bad news, if he got a nomination anywhere, the U.S. is in serious trouble. You might as well concede. You might as well have Xi Jinping come over and run America. By the way, he's not a bad leader. He may actually be a better leader than anything we can find.
Speaking of leaders and everything, Nick and Sasha, and definitely want to get to some other things going on, but apparently we're about to, I know I had mentioned earlier what was going on with Venezuela. You talked about Venezuela a couple of times on some of our shows, including World Politics and World Edition. But apparently there is a move to start or restart deporting Venezuelans. So the U.S. is to restart deportation to Venezuela in an effort to reduce the record border arrivals. So the Biden administration is resuming deportation flights for Venezuelan migrants as arrivals grow. So what is your thoughts around this? And is this a good idea? Because apparently we're going to start shipping them back to Venezuela since apparently they were deemed to be illegal, and we're going to start sending them back to Venezuela.
So, something seriously wrong going on in Venezuela, Mark. And the United States probably has some fault to do with it because of the embargo. But if you look at what happened, I mean, this is the history we get. And of course, the media doesn't discuss it, and it's really hard to get the information. But from what I understand, Hugo Chavez, who was this communist, everything's going to be equal, started seizing the oil fields for the government so that he can disperse the profits to the fools that don't do the work. Well, the fools that don't do the work had this problem. The ones that did the work quit and left. Now the fools that didn't do the work goes, I don't know how to operate an oil field. Does anybody here know how to operate an oil field? No, we don't know. And then all of a sudden, the world's largest oil producing country, or in the reserves at least, shut down. And now they have no oil income. And then all of a sudden they're going, oh, what are we going to do? With no oil income, we can't get food. Without food, we starve. And then Chavez passed his torch on to some other communist, socialist, hey, give all the money away leader. And guess what? It didn't work either. Then the United States jumps in and says, we're going to embargo you because you're communist and because you seized the oil fields. Now all of a sudden you have a failed state. It's called Venezuela. And in Venezuela, you have people that are just normal people that just want to work, live, eat. And one time it was a very wealthy country, and they're going, we are starving. So they run to the borders of the United States. Some of them get in, 40% of them, I think. Some reports will get 25 to 40%. And what do the United States do? You're not here for political reasons. You're just here because you're starving. Go back to your home. And they're going to deport them. And that's called compassionate conservatism.
Well, speaking of compassionate conservatism, one of those
who we are.
Yeah, speaking of one of those compassionate conservatives, one of those is apparently DeSantis, or at least that's what some people try to paint him as. And he's now going full hog against Trump, and is actually, he was a Trump ally, is starting to attack him as he is seeing his lead definitely the Trump lead continue to increase. So he said a strong majority of this country wants a restoration of sanity. And he definitely admitted the Donald Trump supporters are patriotic Americans, but he also goes off on Trump saying that we don't need any more presidents who've lost their zip or lost their zip.
Who's saying this? Who's saying this? Mark DeSantis?
Yes.
Another crazy? So another crazy is calling the crazy guy crazy. That's ridiculous. Nikki Haley seems to be, at least with the first debate, the most rational person that they could put on front of the stands. Right now, I think she's number 2. Behind Donald Trump, and she's gaining ground. But she actually seems like she's the quote adult in the room, and she's making statements which unfortunately are not popular, but actually true. One statement, she goes, we got to increase Social Security age to 75. 75 if you want Social Security to be solvent. And there's going to be some hard choices to make on that. What my thinking is, and that you need to look at, depending what type of work you do, Social Security age should take place. For example, in the trades, remember, Mark, we're trying to promote the trades. Normal retirement age should stay at 65. You're an electrician, plumber, you're in construction, 65, keep it. But if you're in work like I do, law, accounting, where's Lee, stuff like that, make it age 75. Come on, you're not killing yourself to take NRA at age 75. And so the thing is, there needs to be some sensibility about Social Security extending the normal retirement age and also lifting the cap. Lifting the cap is quite simple. Buffett tried to get it through, but people couldn't understand it. People like Buffett don't pay Social Security taxes. What? How could he? Because he has dividend income, morons. The problem is the morons in the United States, and Adam Lamper is right, never took a class on how basic taxes, okay? And people like Warren Buffett do not pay 15.3% in Social Security Medicare taxes. They pay 0 because they're above the wage base. Okay, lifting the cap would bring huge amounts of money into the Social Security system. Now the Republicans will all be against it because they all make above the wage base. Congress is against it. They're all above the wage base. You see what I mean? But the average person listening to this show, well, probably the average person listening to this show is above the wage base too. But the average person out there working is below the wage base, and they don't even know that the wealthy people do not pay Social Security and Medicare taxes. And the politicians aren't going to yell about it because you can't get elected, because you won't get any donors. In other words, lifting the cap could make Social Security solve. Remember, it goes broke in the next decade. Lifting the cap, changing retirement age, doing things that are unpopular but fiscally sound can make Social Security solvent again. But we're not, but people are getting elected because of abortion issues, not the fact that the government's broke. And the only time America's going to figure this out is when we become Venezuela, which may happen in the next 10 years. Go on, Sasha.
Nick, What is Nikki Haley position on raising taxes?
I don't know. See, the thing is, I don't know what her position raising taxes, but Sasha, as you know, there's only two ways you can increase your net worth. You increase your income and decrease your expenses, or do a combination of both.
Right.
The government, if they want to become solvent, there's only two ways they can do it: increase the income, which is basically an increase of taxes,
Absolutely.
and decrease their expenditures, or best do both. Both are unpopular, but it puts the government and our country back on a fiscally sound basis, which we haven't been on for the last 2 decades or 3.
Now, speaking about taxes, a lot of people, so-called Trump's base, and who will vote for him regardless what's developing out of all his proceedings or so on, they believe that he is the best spokesman for their right and for their interests or so on. Make their life easier, maybe better. Do they know how much taxes Trump paid in the last 25 years?
Very, very little, if any. The thing is, this is one of the big tax preference items. It's in real estate. And he spent most of his time acquiring real estate, which is a very heavily tax-favored investment. And everybody knows that. So Trump paid very little in income taxes himself because of the style of investments he has. And this goes back to also wealthy people can, using various different methods, pay actually a lower marginal rate significantly than your working people. And that's what Buffett even was trying to bring out. He goes, I'm in securities. I pay less on a percentage basis than the average person does. The tax situation needs to be revised and looked at very carefully by Congress. I honestly believe they do not have the education, I'm talking about congressmen, the education and the mental strength to take on the tax code properly. So I don't see there's going to be much changes. The only thing they play with is the one metric they can understand is the marginal rate. And that's it. They go, oh, I'm going to bring the marginal rate from 37 to 39%. But like we brought out in the show, that doesn't make the difference. You really have to look at this very carefully. And they're not going to do it because it's not popular, Sasha. Like I said, the two ways to make the United States great again, two ways, both are not popular, but it would make the United States great again. It's just not popular. And that's increasing taxes on wealthy people. And wealthy people, Mark, I keep looking at the studies. 1% of our population owns 40% of all the assets. 40% of our population holds 1%. In the United States of America, you either made it and you're doing good, or you haven't.
That's the whole notion. And like I said, sometimes back, I was involved with it here in Durham. But as I recall, that was the part of the notion behind the Occupy movement and everything along those lines, was that people were complaining about the 1% and the 1% being.
They're right. They're absolutely correct, but they don't have the political will to shut these people down. And I'm going to pick on a couple.
No, it's not only the political will, but even though it was a consensus-based kind of way of organizing, because everything was supposed to be done by a consensus vote, as I recall it, and everything along those lines. But there was also a lot of didn't have really that many alternative plans or really good notions, because there were a number of things and very important issues. I remember talking about things dealing with homelessness, food inequities, and a number of other things. And there were some efforts, including some that I was involved with, that helped in some of those causes and some of those issues that are very important to people in general and everything. But I don't know that there was ever any fully developed plans.
Mark, we're creating a winner-take-all society very similar to Venezuela, as we're setting every day. It's happening. In other words, the wealthy people get wealthier exponentially. I'm going to pick on people that are well-known, like Beyonce and Taylor Swift. The huge amounts of money they make relative to the average person, hundreds of millions of dollars per year, and taxed at a very low rate. And the average person doesn't. But for every Taylor Swift and Beyonce, there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people that are very quiet who make more than them. They're hedge fund managers like Shaquille. Shaquille's not here, so I can beat him up. They're hedge fund managers like Shaquille and other people that you don't even hear about And I only hear about them when they go to Palm Beach and they buy these huge
Well,
mansions.
but when we hear about them, we hear about how talented they are. And I actually had the pleasure on the online
Absolutely.
dinner party of interviewing the personal assistant for Drake. She's also worked for a number of others as well. But Tara Stubbins was on the show, and that's actually something that she said. And I don't know, she might have shot herself in the foot because her exact quote was, "I hope he's not listening." But she was saying that she wasn't sure how talented Drake was as a rapper or as a musician. So, like I said, I need to
Yeah.
reach out to her and find out if she kept her
They-
job.
they
But she was
basically,
the personal assistant and all along those lines. But she did make a valid point that she wasn't sure of his talent level. But hey, he's made billions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars.
they basically won the lottery. In
Right.
other words, the lottery winners, and the lottery is total misallocation of assets. Somebody throws in a couple bucks and all of a sudden they're a billionaire. Are you serious? Now all of a sudden they have huge power, which they have no clue what to do with, but that's another story.
No, that's a whole other story. I agree with you on
But the
that.
thing is, entertainers, hedge fund managers, certain types of occupations that you're able to scale, even people like who's our friend Elon Musk. Then all of a sudden, their net worth, Bill Gates, shoot to the sky, unlimited amounts of money, wealth, and power. And then, what is it, 40%, but maybe as high as 60% of our population has 1% of the assets. They have nothing. I mean, they're basically broke. Now, as that number by the way, it keeps increasing. So as that number increases, you will end up to become Venezuela. The United States will be the next
No,
Venezuela.
speaking of that and everything, there's a
Venezuela, it's
case
almost
going
like
on in
97%
speaking of Venezuela, there's a case going on in Colorado, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts around this because this actually involves something that unfortunately we all face during the course of our life and everything, because it is like we said, we are born, we live life, and at some point, even though many of us, hope for immortality or hope to live a very long life, but at some point there is the consequence of not being here, and what that leads to. Only God Himself knows and everything until we get to that end point. But apparently, there in Colorado, there was a group of folks that were trying to do well by the environment because they do say that sometimes when we pass some of the things we're doing as we are passing aren't that good for the environment. So there was a very popular, apparently, funeral home there that is being investigated because they were trying to do green burials. So they were trying to bury folks without, the use of metal caskets or a number of other things that would keep the earth green and all along those lines. So they were definitely not, don't think they were doing cremations. I don't think they were doing a number of other things that are usually done in that space, including embalming chemicals, which is basically used in most funerals around the country and around the world and everything. But now they are under investigation because they found out that they were having improper storage and all along those lines. So my question is this even like a movement that needs to be taking place and everything with this notion of green burials without embalming chemicals or metal caskets? Because I can tell you that funeral homes have been a economic engine of the world in general because
hey, come on, funerals are good business. You always have clients coming in the door or basically dying in the door. The funny thing about U.S. industries, there's some basic industries that are just really good. The funeral industry being one of them. The problem is, as you can see, is that they can be very expensive. The way it goes through with the caskets and all this other garbage. To throw somebody in the ground and bury them or cremate them, well, they used to do that all the time. It should not be a big deal. However, I can see also the people in the funeral industry who are used to collecting 10 to 20,000 per funeral being totally against an economically more sound way to dispose of all the bodies. It's something you don't take courses in Dying 101, Mark. It's like again back to our education system. We're not really educated in that particular area. I always think life is for the living, and we're the ones that always suffer the most because we have to live through all the garbage that comes with us on a daily basis. When you're dead, who cares? You're gone. Doesn't matter anymore. But when you're living, you've got all these problems that are beset by you, and you have to figure out ways to solve them. And we have some serious problems, as you know, in this country. Just went over one of them, which was immigration.
We got some serious problems.
Also have this one housing, Mark.
Yeah, housing is very big and everything, but we got serious problems. I was going to come back to Sasha with this whole notion of green funerals and everything, because I'm thinking that with the amount of carnage that is going on in Ukraine and Russia, they're probably just like not even having actual funerals. They're probably just putting the bodies in the ground as fast as they can, and in some cases, not even worrying about putting the bodies in the ground, because it is definitely trying to stop this Russian invasion, which is a horrible thing that took place, and all along those lines. So I'm thinking that that's not even happening over there in Ukraine, because y'all are trying to preserve as many lives as possible, particularly there in Ukraine, and get as many Russian people as possible in order to end this war and everything. But am I correct in thinking that because I'm thinking in war times, that's not even a concern as to how to dispose of the bodies?
This war cannot be decided otherwise than on a battlefield. That the only way this war will come to its end or to victory of one of the sides. There is no ground for any diplomatic talks or negotiations. No, there are possible talks about capitulation of Ukraine. That one is open. And the moment that Ukraine would choose to capitulate, that path is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if it's not that, it's only battlefield. And unfortunately, on the battlefield, Ukraine cannot get what it's due because of the Biden's insecurities, fear of escalating, fear of Russian response, and many other stuff that does not allow him to move. For example, ATACMS weapons, the missiles, they could be very effective now when Ukraine is trying to advance its cause on the south front, and it badly needs it, but it's not getting it from the United States because of Biden's beliefs, some political considerations, whatever they might be, and so on. That's unfortunately, that's we have what we have. What can I say? It's very, very unfortunate.
It's definitely unfortunate, everything along those lines. There's no doubt about that and everything. I mean, another thing that is unfortunate is that when we have these horrible crimes, and I do know that there have been a number of cases of people that have reported a number of assaults on women there in that military conflict in Ukraine, many of them being underage and all along those lines. And definitely it seems like there was a recent case similar to that. Unfortunately, it was in a homeless camp, coming back to what Nick was talking about, in Kansas. And I'm going like, how the heck can you even bother to attack a 5-year-old? But that is what happened in Kansas, where a 5-year-old was attacked and raped and everything along those lines. But definitely that kind of comes down to the nature of the homeless, and also the nature of a lot of people's mental stability, because I don't know how you can do that. But apparently this particular homeless campsite, the mother was kicked out of a deplorable home. So there's always that conversation around deplorable and all along those lines. So they have arrested this 25-year-old man who apparently knew the girl and all along those lines. But definitely that's one of the horrors of war and just in life in general, because I know you brought that up a couple of times, Sasha, is how some of these Russian soldiers are mercifully attacking women and even underage women. But I didn't know if you had any.
Well, what happened yesterday, there was an attack on a village of 300 people. It's in Kharkiv region. Now, they had a wake for a soldier who was killed in the war. At the time when there were 50, some maybe 60 people, so which is a substantial percentage of all population of this village. So we're talking about 360 are there, so we're talking about 20% of population of all that village. Russian missile hit that place, killing 52 people. Can you imagine a village where 300 people and 52 were killed instantly in one day? And by the way, this soldier wife and I think daughter, they were also among killed. So this is a war, a Russian style. Why would you fight a well-armed Ukrainian army where you can inflict in incredible damage to the civil population, which is not protected, which has no arms even, or even if they had some, they would be killed instantly by a very dangerous weapon. It's a missile by the name Iskander. And actually, it can carry the nuclear warhead as well, but of course this one didn't. But the damage was enormous. And I look at things are as usual. Biden probably had his breakfast and enjoyed his meal. And in a couple of hours, he's going to have his lunch. He'll enjoy his lunch just as well. And there are people are dying by tens, by dozens, by hundreds, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's very true and everything. Hey, Nick, you mentioned the homeless situation. I definitely want to hear your thoughts around that and everything. But there was a case in New York, and while I am definitely involved in some things around equity and all along those lines, there are times that the equity defense doesn't make much sense. And I think that this is one of them cases and everything, because apparently the gentleman that did the subway shooting has been sentenced, and he was given a long sentence. I think he was given 10 lifetimes plus 10 years and all along those lines. So I don't think he'll be serving that full sentence. That would be next to impossible, since you only get one lifetime in life and all along those lines. But as he was going through his defense and giving his rant, which they will do sometimes after the sentence is imposed, he gave a half-hour long speech in the court, which he said racism in the U.S. health system and the ghetto mental health facilities had failed him and poor people. He compared his plot to attack innocent commuters to the death of Jordan Neely, the homeless man with a long history of mental illness who allegedly was placed in a fatal chokehold by ex-Marine Daniel Penny. I, like that young man, was a mental health consumer. I didn't scream out for help. I made the mistake of reaching out and asking for help. So I guess he's trying to blame the system for going off on this attack. He did say he's responsible for the attack, and it had nothing to do with race, creed, color, or sexual orientation, and they in no way deserve to have what happened to them. And he said he went bust a grape in a food fight. I guess that was his way of saying that he was a pacifist to some degree, even though that attack shows that he wasn't and everything. But does he have a valid point about the health system in this crazy rant that he gave and all, or that just like, the last pleas of a man that is going off to the chambers of the jail forever and everything?
Well, he's correct that the system doesn't work. I mean, for that part, he is correct. His response was not correct. I mean, it's just like when Gandhi found out that the British were basically taking his country, he did the correct response, a nonviolent overthrow of the British out of India. And same with Martin Luther King, nonviolent overthrow of the crazy Jim Crow laws. So his discovery, which is not unusual, of the fact that the mental health system really doesn't even exist in the United States is correct. And it's a big problem, and it failed him. That is all true. But his response needed to be different. But we don't, this goes back to our education system. Our education doesn't even address this, Mark. I mean, it really makes me sick to listen to what is taught in our elementary and middle school. And they're interesting subjects like Latin. Oh, that's interesting, but that doesn't get you anywhere. Algebra. I took a lot of that stuff, but unless you're an engineer, no, Detovi, it's not. You don't need to know that. Same with geometry. I can just go through all the courses and the huge waste of time that we do on our K through 12 education. So then when we have important topics like what you just brought up, they're not even mentioned, and he has no system to deal with it. No one, to my knowledge, even today in K through 12, offers a class on mental health. They don't even offer it. It's completely overlooked. So he's right. The system failed. His response was incorrect, and I don't think he's going to be the last person you're going to see like this, because our system still doesn't work.
I thought about, I remember in yesterday's program about world politics, we had exchange about education and about possible prosperity for all people and other stuff. And my conclusion was that Unfortunately, there is no way to provide equally good education to all people. It's just impossible. Not all people were born in equal financial conditions as of their family is concerned, or geographical area of the country, or even the county, or so on. The inequality is a fact of life. It's there for the last 10,000 years, and will be there for another 315,000 years, if you will. So, what is the way out? Let's see if you are not privileged by your birthrights, you live in unprivileged area, and you don't have access to good education and all this stuff. There are two very important qualities and important for success as of nations and as of individual people. You know, these two are number one, curiosity. Think about this curiosity that what distinguished Europe from Asia and all others when 500 years ago, the curiosity of Europeans led them to fund the different expeditions to discover new world and the way to India and so on. And another one is passion. When you're passionate about something, you will find the way how to achieve your goals. Now, with the abundance of internet resources, primarily YouTube, but others as well, if you have enough curiosity and passion, you can very well educate yourself to a significant level. Forget about diplomas and all that stuff. Nobody's asking these days for a diploma. It's exactly what you bring to the table. What exactly you can do. Okay, you'll get your job in the next 5 minutes. Here's 6 minutes. What are you going to do for me? So I will feel, oh, okay.
Sasha, speaking of curiosity, and I would love to hear your thoughts and Nick's as well. One of the things I was going to bring up on World Politics that I didn't bring up is I had found these interviews of the superintendent of the DC school system from some time back. She has since passed on, and all along those lines. But one of the points that she brought up, and it comes back to your thing that you talk about, Nick, oftentimes, is education and what we choose to educate. Because as she pointed out, and I think rightfully so, I think there's even some documents around there that talk about Christopher Columbus in his diaries had also found evidence that other cultures had already been to America before he got here and everything. And apparently there was a even conversation around Mali, which is a country in Africa, that apparently they had sent an entire fleet over here to this area, and they found some people that looked very much like them when they got here and all along those lines. But you never hear that taught in the school system and everything along those lines. And that's the kind of point that she was making, was that these are things that are chosen to be ignored for whatever reason, that they're chosen to be ignored, even though they are factually based and all along those lines. So what is your thoughts around that? If there are living proof that there are people from other parts of the world, whether it was Asia, Africa, whatever, that got here way before Columbus got here?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've seen some books on that. Even China coming over here, people from Africa come over here, and there's some good theories about that all may have happened. But history is written by has a real bias slant in the United States. And I enjoy history. I love reading it, and I studied a lot of it when I was in K through 12. But what would have been better is a class on mental health. What would be better? A class on physical health. What would be better? A class on medicine. In other words,
no, and I'm glad you brought that up and everything, because Nick, one of the things that and I mentioned that I had the pleasure of interviewing his personal assistant, and I did not know this was going to happen today, but apparently Drake is taking a hiatus, that's the well-known rapper, for personal matters. And as you read the article and you learn further, part of those personal matters is that he is having some issues with his stomach and some other issues that are health related and all along those lines. So he's actually saying that, you know, we always hear about the criticism of rappers, and I'm not saying that they don't, and just performers in general, I'm not saying they don't spend outrageous amount of money, but he's been saying that I've been having the craziest problem for years with my stomach. I'm just saying what it is. The rapper continues. So I need to focus on my health and I need to get that right. And I'm going to do that. I have a lot of other things that I would love to focus on. So I'm locking the door of the studios for a little bit. I don't even know what a little bit is, maybe a year or so, maybe a little longer. So apparently he is actually doing something that I wish more people would do, which is actually taking a break in order to deal with his own health and his own well-being. I actually think that that is a noble thing that many people ought to do, and we don't do because we oftentimes don't pay attention to our own health.
You have 12 years with a kid, to get K through 12, and we should have basic medicine in each one of the classes every year. And like the real problem, Mark, is the teachers don't know how to teach medicine. But Sasha already gave the solution. They don't need to teach anything. They don't need to know anything. The education is on YouTube. All they have to do, and this is weird, is go to YouTube and say, okay, this is what you do in the event of a heart attack. And then they throw a YouTube video on. This is what you do if you have gastroenterological problems. Throw a YouTube video on. So the kids start learning basic medical issues, diseases. In other words, these are the different types of diseases you could get. This is the different procedures that are out there. We could actually enrich our K through 12 in that type of education, which is beneficial for them for their lives. You could do the same thing for financial education. The same thing. Okay, you don't know that much about finances, but here we can direct you to do that and go through basic financial issues all the way to the stock market, options, bonds, etc. So this education is useful for everybody.
It's very useful. We need more of that. I agree with you. Like I said, I was a fan of Schoolhouse Rock back in the day and everything. I know we're winding down. It's been a fun conversation, and along those lines, we've definitely touched on a lot of things. But one of the last things I was going to get to, which is a political story here in the U.S., and I don't know if you or Sasha have some thoughts around it, but there is a possibility that in Alabama, we know Alabama is a deep South state, that there may be a voting block that an extra seat that it would go to the African-American community because of the ways that the lines were drawn. So there's been this whole battle around lines being drawn. And in this particular case, it could be favorable to the African-American voting block and all along those lines. So Nick, I know that you've had some conversations and some thoughts around these kind of things when it comes to gentrification or non-gentrification, but what is your thoughts? And apparently they redraw the line and there might be an extra seat that goes in that case because of the way that it was drawn this time. And I'm sure it'll get challenged just like everything else gets challenged. But any thoughts around that?
40 years ago when I studied law, gerrymandering was, quote, illegal. Then I started looking at the maps here in the great deep South, and they obviously gerrymandered, Mark. And it's frankly a very disgusting procedure. It's almost boggles your mind how much people will do to create inequality in the Great South, and gerrymandering is one of them. I'm going like, are you serious? People still do that today? I thought it was, thrown out 40 years ago. But yeah, Alabama and frankly even North Carolina, they obviously gerrymander the districts, and I don't know who the punks are that do that, but they should all be castrated and thrown in jail. I mean, it's just like, to me, it's one of the most appalling things that I could see 40 years later when it was outlawed 40 years ago. So when we found out, hey, there's no black women in the Senate, I was going, you cannot be serious. I object to the way Newsom did it, but at the same time, you can't be serious. What we have today is a system that existed maybe 40 some years ago and hasn't changed very much.
Well, not only that, but the other thing that we saw happening is the whole conversation we've had it before around gun control, and I'm oftentimes fascinated when we see things that go on, like a man that shows armed at a Wisconsin Capitol twice in one day. So apparently the armed man was seeking to find the Wisconsin governor. He then posted bail, and then he returned with a rifle, an assault rifle, after he had already been arrested there with a gun. So he was arrested there first time with a gun, then they let him out on bail, and then he came back with another gun. So he showed up twice in one day, asking, I guess, to have a meeting with the Wisconsin governor and all along those lines. But I mean, I guess he wasn't satisfied with the first gun he had and wanted to come back after he got out on bail with another gun. I'm going like, that doesn't make sense. And how did he get out as fast as he got out, even with the initial gun situation? But that's just our crazy legal system and all along those lines.
Get rid of the Second Amendment, then we can talk about guns. Until then, it's like this. The people that believe in the Second Amendment should also believe in driving horse and buggies to work every day, okay, and getting rid of their cell phones and radios, because that law, the Second Amendment, was written. There was no cars, there was no automobiles, there were no trains. And so you have a law, the Second Amendment, that existed and was born out of an era that isn't even close to what it is today. So the people that love the Second Amendment, all I can say is get rid of your cell phone, get rid of your TV set, take your horse and buggy to work, because that's when the law was written.
You mean that Lee has to drive a horse and buggy now? He can't drive a car. He has to get in his horse and buggy all along those lines. So he's got to get a horse and buggy. I also did love his.
I mean, if Lee's favored of the Second Amendment, I suggest he get rid of his car and take the horse and buggy.
Yeah, it's time, because we got to get ready to do the Ukraine show and all along those lines. So it's time for us to get on out of here. I do have to tease Lee, because he did say that he wanted to. People are dying to get into funeral homes and cemeteries. So even though Jacoby is our resident comedian, and I've done some straight man work with some comedian friends of mine, and all along those lines, I did love that comment.
Have a good weekend. Love you.
Do the same. Talk to you a little bit.
Bye-bye.